Hello, this is Jim Howard with Trinity Security Allies. We're really excited about a new function, a new feature that we're going to be offering to our members. And I just kind of wanted to introduce it and tell you a little bit about us so you kind of understand where we're coming from and why we feel that this is the next step that we should be taking as far as helping churches and protecting themselves. Having moved to Florida in 2002, rededicating my life to Christ, I began looking for a way to serve the church that would fit my talents. Being in law enforcement most all my life, I needed a ministry that would fulfill me and challenge me. In 2007, First Christian Church came to me and asked me to set up a security team to watch the large amounts of money that were being raised for a new building that was being built over in Pasco County. Of course, when they asked me to be kind of security, my mind raced and I thought about the training in my life. I was with the Norfolk Police Department in 1999 when Columbine happened and learned about active shooters and even trained working in that type of scenario. In 2001, I was in DC area for 9/11, and I understood the concept that churches were soft targets and needed to be hardened. The church came back and told me that they just needed me to watch the large amounts of money uh, being taken from point A to point B, even though this wasn't what I envisioned. I explained to the church I was a good servant and would watch the money from point A to point B. In 2008, our church went through a situation that caused us to rethink what we were looking at in church safety. It was brought to our attention that a subject, Charles Deer, had a court order of supervised visitation with his children and was violating this order while on the church's property. The distraught ex-wife explained to us that Deer would go into the children's ministry while she was attending church and take the kids and walk around the property. She continued with he had been violent in the past and she was afraid he was going to hurt the children. The leadership of the church came to me about the issue, and I explained to them that we were aware of this court order. We had to obey it and also protect the children and the ex-wife, especially while she was on church property. While waiting for a copy of the court order, Deer threatened to beat up his ex-father-in-law because just simply the father-in-law had asked for the children when Deer had taken them from the children's ministry. The very next week, a Pasco detective showed up at the church and talked to us about Deer being the main person of interest in a murder case. This murder happened the same weekend that Deer threatened his ex-father-in-law. Deer was later arrested for the murder of his landlord and is still in prison at this time for the crime. This caused the church to rethink how we should handle the safety of the church and our children's ministry. They came to me again and started asking me about setting up a safety team. So I started doing research on the concept of church safety, and I found that the best resources for the ministry is the Bible. Taking examples from the story of Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the wall in Jerusalem, we learned two things. That we, in any situation, we first must pray to God. And in Nehemiah 4:13, it states, we find, therefore I stationed some people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. Our church safety had to be built around the families of the church. We find in Isaiah 62:6, I have posted watchmen on your walls, Jerusalem. They will never be silent day or night. You who call on the Lord, give yourself no rest. And in Ezekiel 33:1-6, we find that if we do not warn the people of the sword coming, the blood of the innocent will be on the safety team member's head. This was a new concept to everybody. So we decided that using these verses and many more, it had become clear that church safety is not a choice anymore, but a command from God himself. I also realized that this must be done with the understanding that safety team members did not get in the way of the mission of the church. Our mission statement with Generations Christian Church is connecting people with Christ. The safety team's mission statement needed to comply with that, as in protecting those connecting people to Christ. Soon after we moved into our new facilities at 1540 Little Road in Trinity, Florida, Generations Christian Church, we found that we had to adapt to our new surroundings. Every new building, we found new challenges, and we learned to overcome and adapt and form the real safety team of the church, which included oversight and training. The first thing that we worked on was the children's safety. After the Charles Deer incident, the children's safety took another look at check-in and check-out of a child during a church service. With the implementation of a two-tag system where one tag is placed on the child and the other is given to the parent, prevented the incident of a Charles Deer. from ever happening again. We then turned our focus on members of the church. In studying church safety, we realized that active shooting scenarios were reactive and not proactive. And so we started looking for the root of the threat and saw this was deeper than we had thought. Domestic violence and mental illness were the origin in most church shootings. And there, most of the time, were red flags that, if observed and acted upon, might have stopped the majority of the mass shootings in the churches. With that in mind, we started to focus on the symptoms before and not after the shooting had started. We knew that our volunteers and staff would be the first to learn about issues at home and red flags, and understood the importance of training them on what to look for. We learned that if we can keep the wolves at bay, we have a better chance of protecting the flock. During this time, the Center for Public Safety Innovation, a federally funded organization, heard about our active shooter training and came out and videoed our training. They told us that we were the first church that they had looked at, and they had been looking over a year, and they felt that we had put the church first in protecting the flock instead of going after the shooter. We felt we were moving in the right direction at that time. We presented to the church that our volunteers and staff were the first line of defense of any church safety plan. They know the members, and they see the changes in the families that could lead to issues in the church. We asked the church members if we could do church safety training to all volunteers and staff. The church agreed that it was time to bring all volunteers and church staff into the era of church safety and provide training for them. In 2010, we did our first actual church training where over 200 people attended the 2-day training. It was at this point we felt we created something that needed to be taught to churches across the nation. We started to get calls from churches in the area to come and provide guidance on the start of their church safety plans. We continued to have more training at the church, inviting other churches and local law enforcement. The word got out about our training, and we received more calls on helping other churches with issues they were facing. Most of the time, the conversation was, how do we persuade church leadership that a safety team is necessary? And our response was, don't talk about active shooter, talk about children's safety. And this always got the leadership's attention. Our church safety program started when we had children in danger, not because of a violation of a court order, but the possibility of children under our care being hurt or even killed. By the end of 2014, this had turned into a part-time job that was consuming more time than Wendy and I had ever expected. Wendy and I talked about doing this as a full-time ministry, but just could not see how we could be able to maintain our lifestyle that we were used to at the time. Even though we did not have a lavish existence, we still needed to make sure that we could support the family and our 2 daughters. Besides, the current job I had in law enforcement allowed me to work days with weekends off. Most law enforcement jobs require shift work and the possibility of having to work during holidays. So I was blessed with the employment that I had. In 2015, I got a call from a friend, an ex-law enforcement colleague of mine, about coming to North Carolina to do some church safety training. I told them to pay for my expenditures and I would come up and do the training for free. It was a wonderful experience of taking the knowledge of what I had learned and teaching others on how to protect the flock while keeping the doors open and expanding the kingdom of God. During the trip, my friend pushed me into thinking about doing this full time and taking this around the country. I told him I didn't feel God was leading me there, and of all the concerns of supporting my family. Little did I know that when I returned from North Carolina, Wendy took me out to dinner to discuss the future of this ministry. She explained to me that I needed to choose either the police department or starting a ministry to help churches start safety teams. But I couldn't do both because she and the girls were not seeing me much because of all the work I was doing. She had looked at the finances and she felt that we could make it work. This was a leap of faith for both of us. We took that leap of faith and trusted God that this was where he wanted us to go. I knew where my heart was, but wanted to make sure it was where God wanted me to go. I prayed over the decision, and when I was getting ready to turn in my retirement papers, I received a text from a church needing immediate assistance because of a situation that had happened at their church. I knew where God wanted me, and Trinity Security Allies was formed. Shortly after the ministry started, we knew that we wanted to meet the needs of the churches all over the area. Having been in law enforcement and understood the need for networking, we found several instances where prophets and sexual offenders that had been at our church had gone to other churches after they found out we had a safety team that were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, Nehemiah 4:15. These wolves would go to another church and start plotting against that church. So it became important that we start networking the churches to share information on those that would love to disrupt the church. But this was just a start. We also needed to create training programs that would be available information for all churches, staff, and volunteers. Our first year, we put together Why Church Safety with some situational awareness training, but we felt that this was only the start. We then worked on threat profiling, or what to look for on Sunday when people attend your church. Then we found that we needed to train safety team members on how to talk to a possible threat with verbal de-escalation. Using these 3 training sessions, we felt that the churches would be better prepared for what would be facing them in this fallen world. We had taken this training and education across the United States, mostly by word of mouth and using only social media to get out the information. We still wanted to do more for the churches, so we created our Church Safety Conference. With 3 years in a row, God gave us incredible speakers like Pastor Terry Howell, Sr. from Kissimmee, Florida, who had protected himself against an employee that he was letting go. Then we had Ron Holland, who had taken a youth group from his church to hear a play at Wedgwood Baptist Church, where a gunman opened fire, killing 7 and wounding 7. God then made a connection for us, and we were able to get Julie Workman, a survivor from the Sutherland Springs Baptist Church shooting, where we had a domestic issue bleed over into the church, and 26 innocent people were killed and 20 wounded. Julie talked about how she and her 2 sons were injured and how God's presence was felt during this terrible tragedy. But we were still looking for more ways that we could serve the churches. So we started looking at laser shots and shoot, don't shoot software to help put church safety team members in real life scenarios to see how they would react in a stressful situation. Little did we know that Laser Shot would connect with us a year later and ask us to help them write and produce 28 different church-specific scenarios that we would now use to help safety team members to look for red flags and ways to get out of a situation without having to use a weapon, but also be able to use verbal de-escalation to end dangerous circumstances. At the end of 2019, we had touched over 500 churches across the United States. We had been invited to North Carolina, South Carolina, Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, Illinois, and Iowa, and all over the state of Florida. We had just recently been invited to Wisconsin when the COVID-19 virus shut down the country. We didn't want to stop, so we quickly learned how to use the technology provided to us and continue to put our training that you had come to expect from us. Facebook Live was our first attempt to keep you advised on what we were seeing across the country. And then when DHS put out its warning of potential threats against churches after we started to return to our houses of worship, we felt it was perfect timing with our use of Zoom training for those churches in our safety team network and around the country. In our Zoom training, Weapons in the Church, we had 17 different states attend our webinar. We still wanted to do more. We felt that those of you who had been faithful in supporting our ministry deserved a way of continued training. So Wendy and I will be putting together our training online for those that continue to help fund our ministry in your monthly contributions. This is a way that we can give back to those that from the beginning have supported us. We will continue our Thursday night training webinars free to anyone who wants to be a part of that training. We will then put these trainings online for those that support the ministry for your use at any time. We feel that this is the least we can do for those that have been so faithful in your support of our ministry. This training will be there where you can go and refresh your teams on how to protect the flock and continue to expand the kingdom of God. Together, we will create a safe place for those that come to worship and serve a loving God serve a loving God that has chosen you to be his protector of his bride. This site is for you, so training that you would like to see, please let us know so we can continue to serve you with what God has put in front of you. I look forward to working with you in this most important ministry. This has been a journey that I never in my life ever thought would go this far. I am so thankful for those that are out here that have worked with us from the very beginning. Go to our website, Trinity Security Allies, to find out more about this special offer that we are offering church safety team members. We want to get the word out and we want to continue to protect the flock. Be safe and God bless you.